And we're live. So, I'm in Amsterdam and it is sunny and warm here. And let me see. I put on blush today. Last time my cheeks were red from the suntan. I'm just having a little chit chat till everyone signs in. What I want to do today is it's going to be a very difficult conversation, and it's also going to be a really important and honest conversation. For those of you who are just joining, my name is Shay Hardy. I am the managing director of empowerment.work and Empower Amsterdam, and together we provide career resources that are accessible to everyone. Um, we're having our first talk about racism, and this live chat is going to talk about how to talk about racism. With everything going on in the world, and I know it all started in the United States with Black Lives Matter and with the protests, but really it's something that's going on worldwide. I live in the Netherlands, but I'm American, and there is racism all over the world. There's no real place to escape it. And today I've brought on three really amazing people who are going to help me discuss how to discuss racism with your friends, within your community, and even at work. First, let's bring them on. Can we bring them on all at once? I also want to thank our producer, Justine, who's in the background. Thank you so much for being part of this team and helping me put this together. So we have Bernice Fellathine, and Justin Williams, and Lana. I don't know how to say your last name. Lana
Yelenev.
Yelenev. So Bernice is a diversity and inclusion, not just a coach, but also a mentor and consultant. We've had numerous conversations about diversity and inclusion and being a brown person or brown skinned person in the space of the world, basically, and how we contribute to the conversations. I've known Lana for a really long time, since we started our foundation, and she's really, her title is Community Alchemist, but it's way more than that. She has a real gift at bringing people together and helping people see their true selves, feel authentic, and feel connected. I think that's one of your true gifts. And then there's Justin. And Justin, I've known since I was 8. We went to church together in New York, Long Island, separated for some time now, distance, miles, age, and back together again. So thank you guys all for joining us. This conversation about race, it's always been there, but we don't always do it. And some of us don't do it that well. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is, let's just first start off with what is racism, race? And we've spoken about this before, and Justin gave us a very, very eloquent definition of how, not only about racism, but what we should be calling ourselves. And I was wondering if you could share that again, Justin.
Sure, Shay, I'll try my best to recreate it. We were, vibing off of each other a few days ago, and so hope to do it justice. But first, thanks so much for allowing me to be a part of this important conversation. I really appreciate being a part of it. As much as we, those of us who are engaged with this work, as much as we are tired of engaging with this work, it's crucial that we do, and in the process try to create people of a lighter complexion who are going to really move to the forefront of doing this work, because I feel that all over the world, ultimately the onus to eradicate racism falls on the people who are perpetuating it. So I think the long-term goal, okay, is to get over complexion issues. Okay, in the case of our species, judging each other in terms of our complexion is a relatively new phenomenon, and I feel, and there's research that really will support the fact that we do this. We judge each other by complexion in part to validate and justify economic systems that require inequality, that require poverty, that require a social hierarchy in terms of location and space. So it's a justification, racism is a justification for that. So long term, I really feel personally that it'll be difficult to completely eradicate racist notions of and behaviors and thoughts while we continue to exist within any broad economic system. Um, so there's that piece. Also, I think it's important for us to remember that we are one species. We are Homo sapiens. Uh, Current scientific and genetic understanding is that we, as a species, evolved in Southeast Africa, and we colonized the planet from there. And physical transformations occurred as we moved away from the equator. So, in that respect, we are all cousins.
I think,
And the notion, oh, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. I think that is a very important thing to know if you don't already know it. And if you do know it, it's a good reminder that we're all of the same. There is only one race, and I think it's a
Jane Elliott.
Jane Elliott. She says that all the time.
Right,
There is no black, white. There is only one race, the human
right,
race. But I cut you off.
right.
Read and let you finish that statement.
Yeah, so so it's important because for me and for us maybe part of the serious problem of existing on this planet is the feeling that we have to constantly justify that we are human,
I shouldn't laugh
which
about that, but
which is what racism you know makes you within yourself question, like, am I being treated this way because I'm not considered to be human? And then, of course, we have a long history of eugenics that was created to justify the fact that we, as darker complexion people, were less than people of a lighter complexion. Of course, that entire body of science has been debunked. It was ridiculous. It was a travesty, but it was done
yeah,
along with other atrocities. So racism is the foundation from which trillion-dollar empires in Europe and the United States were created uh, by. The African
right,
slave trade is a legacy that continues to haunt us as a species, and until we atone for it, we're going to have these same issues.
right. Um, I think one of the things we should also realize is that even as brown skinned people or darker skinned people, we are all experiencing what's going on very differently. Um, we also call ourselves by different names. We live in different countries. We're as complex as any other human being out there. And when you're approaching this subject, I think Bernice, you were saying something about where we are all at on this journey.
Yeah, exactly. What I've noticed the last couple of weeks when talking to other people about this subject is that, and from myself as well, is that we're all on different stages within this journey, and some of us are just at a spot that we are like, wow, I'm feeling all kinds of new emotions I've never felt before, or I'm reliving old trauma, and we have other people who are like, oh yes, this is awful. We need to jump and action and go 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 go, and other people maybe like, yes, but people don't mean it like this, and they start to talk about we all have issues and all lives matter, and not, we all know those kind of things. And I think we need to remind ourselves that if someone is really emotional, let that person be emotional and just listen and give space to that emotion, and maybe not jump to, oh, and now we're going into action and go 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 go. So when talking about racism, I think it's emotional for all of us, doesn't matter what color your skin is. Feelings of anger, pain, guilt, doesn't matter, they're all valid. And and I think the starting point of having a meaningful conversation about racism is daring to stay with that discomfort, daring to stay within the emotion and just sit with each other, and just feel like, oh god damn, this hurts, and I'm sad and I want to cry and I want to scream and I maybe don't understand, but let's sit with it for a while, and before we jump into all those other kinds of things. And yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. I think when we're saying we I think for a lot of people they still don't understand, or they're still learning about what has been happening to people of different colors and the experiences that they're going through. I know, as I've been in groups where where some people have said, "Let's all come together and let's talk about it," and I feel like I've been talking about it.
Yeah, I don't want
I,
to talk
I
about it
talked
anymore,
about
but
it. I don't want to talk
yeah,
about it anymore. And like,
no.
I'm at the height of done. I'm just done.
And I've noticed for myself as well, like I'm going back and forth, like with, sometimes I do want to talk about it and sometimes I don't. And one day, with these people I do want to talk about it, and with these people I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah,
And I think we need to be mindful and also understand and make space for that to be true.
yeah, yeah.
Sometimes you don't want to talk about it and it's like, not now, maybe go talk to someone else. I'll join you next time again when I feel, yeah, when I'm really hurting. I'm yeah,
I'm
maybe
not
next
in
time.
on the mood. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not in the mood.
Lana.
I'll jump in on what Bernie said with
Yeah,
regards to choosing, the spaces wherein you can contribute or share your voice. I think it's very important that we also, are intentional in who do we share our stories with, and how we share our stories with, because let's face it, anything that makes us remember the microaggressions, the trauma, it stays within our bodies, it stays within our psyche, and it's something that we also would have to process.
yeah,
And I find it very important that, in terms of self-care, that we have that boundary set in where are the spaces where I would feel heard, that I would feel supported, and how can I drive these conversations with these people, knowing that this is a safe space for me.
yeah,
Yeah, and also be very mindful, and this again is for everybody. This the psychological safety that is needed to have this conversation. So maybe you're really enthused by, well, let's make a change, and we're gonna change everything. But also check with the other person if the timing is okay, if they're feeling comfortable sharing what they've been living, and all the, like Lana is saying, microaggressions. Even if it's a microaggression, if it's like small things at work that happen, people that you notice that people are listening, maybe not as much to your story as they're listening to other one's stories, that can be extremely intimidating and painful, and to ask someone to relive that just so you can learn can be very tense. So be
yeah,
mindful about that.
I like to speak to something that Lana said in terms of trauma staying with us. I love that concept. I think it's so true because trauma is certainly passed down genetically. We have blood memory of trauma. We
Yes.
There are those of us throughout the world who are descendants of breeding programs during the slave trade. So aggression was bred into you or out of you. It was very, very advanced. We don't talk about it, but
mm,
it's in this way we, all of us, continue to suffer from this historical trauma, all of us.
Yeah.
So racism uh, harms all of us on all sides. And I do want to say that racism is an existential threat to the future of our species on this planet, because as a result of capitalism being built on racism, and trillion-dollar empires now are harming severely the environment. And so I think that, you know, dealing with racism is an existential necessity.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and I've noticed that also in my work. I work as also as a coach, and I use constellations,
Mm,
family constellations, and organizational constellations. And the trauma that Justin and Lana are talking about, it's very visible when you do a constellation, when you do constellation work.
mm,
And also for people are not really conscious about what they're carrying in their bodies.
yeah.
And once it becomes apparent and it becomes visible and a light is shown upon that, it you can feel it, the tension that just that
Yeah.
comes out of a system like that. So when thinking and talking about racism, you also really need to have that systemic view, because it's a systemic problem. And it's
Yeah.
not just about learning all kinds of facts and everything, but also really releasing that tension, that trauma from the system.
I want to talk a little bit about that systemic racism. I mean, there's the obvious, blatant, overt racism that using the N word, you saying things that you're not good enough because of the color of your skin. That's all. It's obvious. You know, the white caps, the KKK, all of that is obvious. What is Ooh, Lana, you took a deep breath, girl.
Yeah.
What
Self
isn't?
care. That is that.
Yeah, self-care.
Everybody at home also take a breath.
Take
Yeah.
a breath. Yeah. What is the what is really the problem is the stuff that you don't know, that you don't it's not so obvious, but we still feel it. I had the first time I've ever really experienced racism in Europe was on a work situation, and I was working with this colleague, and we were only on the phone. This is pre-video conferencing and stuff, and we were like perfect together as colleagues. We were fed off each other. We got things moving, and he was like, "You should come and visit me, and we could work side by side because we would get so much work done." And I was like, "Yeah, that would be a great idea." My boss sent me to London for the day. I checked in, I sat in the lobby, and I waited for, for him to come down and get me. And I see this guy walking towards me because there's no one in the lobby. I came like after rush hour, after everyone coming in. I'm the only one in. He's the only one walking in. And I was like, "Oh, that must be him." So I look at him, like like greeting face, like and he walks right past. He just walks right past me, and I'm like, "There's no one else in the lobby. There's no one else in the lobby." And immediately I felt this like a drop in my stomach. I just knew something horrible had gone wrong here. And he walked right over to the reception desk, and he had like this plastic face, that that looked
Oh
like
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not saying anything, but I'm.
But I'm thinking it.
So he comes back over to me. He's very pleasant. He's like, "Hi, Shay. Let's go upstairs." It's still only us anywhere in the building. "Hi, let's go inside. Let's go upstairs." We get to the elevator. Two people walk off. We go in. It's just me and him. And he turns to me and he's like, "I won't be able to work with you at all today. Something's come up and my whole day is booked." And I only flew over there just for him. He invited me up there. And, it's such a subtle thing. It's not like he said, "I don't want to work with you." It's not like he pointed at me or he did anything to me, nothing.
Mm.
But the vibe completely shift. I came up to upstairs, I sat next to him, and he was like, wouldn't even look at me. He stared at his screen and did nothing for about 15 minutes. And I was like, I was like, wow, my stomach was like in turmoil just from the friction and the energy that he was giving off. I couldn't sign into my laptop. I couldn't do anything. Luckily, I already had other meetings anyway set up. So I went to go meet someone else. And the whole time I'm going to meet this other person, I'm thinking, oh my God, is he also going to feel the same way? And luckily he didn't. He saw me, he hugged me. He doesn't even know me, but he was like, Shay, hugged me. And that was almost like verification for me that what I felt with the other person was true. He did not want to work with me because of the color of my skin. It was obvious. Yes. So
Yeah.
maybe we could share our own and share what's most comfortable with you, of course, how you see systemic racism in either in your own personal stories or for other people that you've seen it through other people.
Well, I
I
feel
can
like
start. Oh,
go ahead,
okay, go,
Lana. Go ahead,
Justin.
Lana. No, Lana, go please.
Well,
We're so polite.
perhaps I can start with the lens of, how I got started into thinking about racism. Coming from the Philippines, yeah, you see brown people everywhere. so, so the idea of, someone being white has been deeply ingrained in us as superior. In the Philippines, there's just quite a lot of whitening products everywhere. You see it from toothpaste to deodorants to even soaps. So there is this, there I grew up in a culture where whiteness is considered to be the beauty standard, and at the same time what a lot of people look up to for. So that for me was like, and nobody questioned it. I grew up in the Philippines and nobody was questioning, why do we have thousands of whitening products. So for me, when I went out of the country and came here in the Netherlands, that was for me the first time that I found myself as a minority. And the experiences that I had was so traumatic. I would definitely say it to be traumatic. The first time that I was in an HR meeting applying for a position that I would say was even very basic. So I was, before coming here, I was setting up schools, training teachers, and I applied for a position that was as a childcare worker in what's this, a childcare facility. And the HR blatantly said to me, "Oh, you don't have educational background here in the Netherlands. You don't speak the language, even though I'm applying as an English childcare worker. You don't have the experience here in the Netherlands." So she basically put my level at someone who is still studying at zero. And I was just like, oh, I wouldn't take this. I was really surprised to be getting that. I said I wouldn't take, I wouldn't take this. I've been training, putting up schools, creating curriculum. I've worked abroad, studied, and for me, it was just like, no, this is not acceptable. So, with my chin, up high, I went out of that door, went out of the building, and then got on the phone, and then I told my husband, what am I doing here? That was the first time in my entire career that I was put to the position of someone that is very less than my credentials, than what I've done. And for me, that was such an eye-opening experience. And I know from that experience how it somehow shattered my self-confidence. It took me some time to get back into applying for jobs or or even contemplating on going back to the workforce. So that's also when I was like, okay, you know what? I'll just do consultancy work. But yeah, that for me was a very eye-opening experience that it started me in that path of what do people see when they see me, and I've seen that also when I was giving trainings. There's a difference when they see a white trainer coming in from when I come in. So you feel the energy, like what you said, you feel the energy just shifts.
Yeah.
And there's there is quite a lot of questioning that happens. You know, you question your enoughness, you question your abilities, you question who you are, your identity. And this for me is something to, yeah, to really uh, dive in deeper. You know, that these microaggressions, or like what, you know, Bernice said a while ago, that people have different ways of reacting. um, it is still, you know, it's still painful and it is still traumatic. And how do we go about that? So with
Yeah.
this, all with these experiences.
Yeah, exactly. Justin or Bernice?
Justin, go ahead.
You sure, Benice?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Um, so I'll just try to provide maybe a couple of vignettes that maybe encapsulate what it is like to be a male with brown skin in the United States. It was 1996, and my mother had just passed away. And I was driving her car. It was a red Ford Taurus. And the week before the incident I'm going to talk about happened, I was in Brooklyn, New York, and I was rear-ended by another driver. And so the rear bumper of the Taurus was damaged. So the following week, I'm in Manhattan, in New York City, with my two cousins, 23 years old, and we are. I parked my car on 7th Avenue. We're getting out. We're going to a Pizzerina Uno restaurant to eat and talk. And we get out and we walk a block, and we're about to get on the line. It's a line outside the restaurant to get in. And out of nowhere, these undercover police officers kind of attack us and throw us up against the wall. And this is happening in front of a group of mostly quote unquote white people who are online for this restaurant. And we're being roughed up and being verbally abused by these police officers. And I have no idea why. Now, fortunately, one of my cousins was himself a police officer,
Yeah.
but he was not initially stopping this. And in my head, then I'm getting my face pushed up against a brick wall, and I'm saying to myself, "Hello, when are you going to make this stop?" Like I'm thinking to my cousin, "Why are you not identifying yourself?" And I'm watching him, and he's got this real calm look on his face as they're pushing him against the wall as well, and he's just kind of trying to see how far this is going to go before doing so. And so finally, he gives the signal at the time. He said, "I'm on the job." That was the code for officers to identify themselves to each other. I'm on the job. And they go from just being really, really violent to just one of them just said to him, "Oh, you could have told us sooner that that you're an effing cop." Literally said it just like that, and they just turned and walked away. Now we surmised later that they saw three dark-skinned men getting out of a damaged car. They ran the license plate, and my mother's name came up from the insurance. Okay. And so they assumed that we stole the car.
Mm. Mm.
Now, that is one of six incidents I can give you in my 20s where I was unrighteously pulled over, held at gunpoint, all kinds of things that you wouldn't believe, but absolutely happened to me. And I don't know an man in the United States with dark skin who doesn't have multiple stories of these sorts of run-ins with police officers. I don't know one. I've never met another man who looks like me in this country of 350 million people. There's about 50 million of us, 40 million of us in this country. I've yet to met a male with dark skin who doesn't have multiple stories of these sorts of run-ins with law enforcement officials in this country. Um, I lived in Abu Dhabi for about a year, and it took me maybe 2 months to walk in the streets of Abu Dhabi without constantly looking around to see where police officers were.
Wow.
I was never followed by police in Abu Dhabi. I was never followed by anybody when I walked into a restaurant or a store. It was a totally different and beautiful experience. Um, so racism is like the stink in the bathroom that you get used to, and then somebody else walks in and goes, "Oh my gosh, it stinks," and you're like, "Oh, I didn't notice," because you get used to it and you
Yeah.
adapt.
Can I ask you something,
Um,
Justin?
sure.
What did you notice about yourself living in Abu Dhabi, not having to look over your shoulder all the time? What did that to you as a person?
Um, what did I notice about myself? It's an interesting question, Bernice. Well, I just noticed the extent to which I am mindful of who's watching me
Hmm.
and and my own behavior, so that I'm not doing anything that's going to make me a target.
Mm.
Yeah,
Um,
Yeah.
I became aware of the things that I
you were
do
doing.
that are so subtle, but yet I feel compelled to do in order to protect myself
Right.
from literally being killed.
Right.
Wow.
Mm.
I need to take a breath now. That not having to live as a black man in America, but I so can relate. Because when I go back to your question, Shay, about how we experience racism, maybe in our work or other places, to be honest, I haven't faced blatant racism in my work experience. I've been lucky enough. I've worked in really international places. I've worked in tech industry for startups, and that's super international. But I have noticed that, especially lately, when I'm looking back, and also now being a coach and looking back on how you hold yourself as a
Yeah.
person, I have to admit that starting from a very young age, I was 4 when my mother moved to the Netherlands from Suriname. At a very young age, I started to assimilate and starting to, um, which I can now articulate, of course, not as a 4-year old, but looking around you and making sure that you understand what the code amongst the people is so that you can fit in and that you don't stand out. And I noticed it for the first time last year when I was in a training with only brown people for the first time in my life, but because mainly I work, act, and socialize in mainly white environments. And then for the first time, I was in an environment with only brown people, and I felt my body relax in a way
Mm.
that was new, and that shocked the hell out of me. So I can totally relate to Justin saying that it takes you need to get out of the situation for you to notice what you've been doing in the situation.
Yeah.
And I think racism in the Netherlands it's systemic, it's institutionalized.
Yeah.
Luckily, we don't experience a lot of the examples that we see from the States and everything. But it does make you be on guard
Yeah.
and makes you feel like that you need to scan a room. Am I safe here? Okay, what's the code? We're brown people and people from other places. We're extremely good at code switching,
Yeah.
knowing what the code in the room is and your own code. And
It's
Yeah.
a
I think
necessity.
it's a
It's a
necessity.
survival.
It's
Yes.
exactly, and that's something that's so hard to explain to people, but that's what it is. It's survival. And what do I need to do in this space to be safe and to fit in and not to be the odd one out?
Yeah.
Or how
Yeah,
do I
Bernice,
what do I have to do to make others feel comfortable with my presence?
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. And the question of, yeah, how can I fit in? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
how
and
can
at
I
this
fit in? How can I not stand out?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's of course true for all of us. People of all colors, we all want to fit in. Doesn't mean only people with a darker skin have that fear. But because you're immediately judged without people even knowing you, you're so
Hmm.
aware of people judging you. And
Yeah.
that it's something that you cannot hide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that makes it so a big part of your everyday life, basically.
Yeah. Ooh.
And
Yeah.
this is also why it's important to see how it affects individuals, because our nervous system is, in situations like this, our nervous system is just on alert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we go by the body keeps the score, it's like all these situations that we're in, scanning the environment, looking at, hey, who's in the room, how do I present myself, how do I do things. It takes a lot of work
Yeah.
And energy.
and energy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you heard this term before, because I've heard it come around a few times in other conversations, like minority stress.
Ah,
Yeah.
Have you heard that term before?
I haven't
Yeah.
heard it.
For me, it was also new, but it speaks to what we're talking about now, that constantly being on alert and people being tired, and that a lot of um, people yeah, a lot of people have been experiencing a lot of um, tiredness
Yeah.
lately.
Yeah.
And for me as well, it's like I'm so tired. I'm like, why am I so tired? And
Yeah.
then someone said this, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe this is it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I want to quickly address. We have some people watching along with us, and I see there's
Yay!
a lot of activity going on in the chat room. And Tammy, thank you for your that analysis of code and environment is necessary, but also tiring. Yeah, that's true. There was a question in there, and if anyone else has another question, oh, and also Tammy, necessary because of white-centered environments. I mean, very true, very true. If anyone has any questions, please share them in the chat. I saw quickly a question from Maria, and I didn't want to break up our flow of conversation before I got in there. I can't find it anymore. I think she said something about addressing or, yeah, that one, but I thought there was one before that. Yeah, it is disgusting behavior. We should address it. I think you were referring to my story about the
Yeah,
colleague who did not want
yeah.
to work with me because of the color of my skin. And I see some conversation going on here. But the reason why, uh, the reason why we don't, the reason I'm going to speak for myself because other people can share, but the reason why I don't automatically address it is because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of emotional work. It's mentally exhausting. And then to have someone like what Leslie said, you risk your job, your contract, the person attacking your reputation. It can go all wrong by you addressing it. Saying you don't pick your, there is a saying, don't pick your you don't pick battles you don't feel confident you can win. The only upside of feeling better is that you expressed yourself. I've kind of, as I'm a little bit older now in my, a little bit older, I don't need to prove myself to anyone anymore. If you could take your racist attitude and go on with it. I don't have time for you because there's enough people in my world that I don't have to constantly battle it. It's not to say that I don't battle it ever, but I can't fight all of them by myself.
Mm.
I can't. And I actually need the help of people who are of the fair complexion with the lighter skin to help me fight this. And that's what we're seeing right now in not just America, it's everywhere. People are just have been learning that there's more to it. Another comment from Leslie, and start thinking how you contribute to not allowing others, uh, the future generation to be authentic. Yeah, that
Can I
was,
speak to that, Shay?
yeah, yeah,
Because what foundationally what we have to address is because previous generations, in their own ways, shapes, and forms, have had these sorts of discussions. There has been a constant fight. One of the myths of slavery in the Western world was that African people who were enslaved just peacefully accepted slavery, when in fact the exact opposite
Yes,
was
I will
true.
go on the
There,
boat myself.
there was constant uprising to the point where the foundations of why the police was formed was you had white males in the United States who were on these slave patrols to go and try and catch Africans who constantly ran away, constantly. Okay, so so there is this idea that we have to contend with. What happened to Shay? What is the foundational reason for it? And we have to look at the economics behind it. It is saying to us, we do not wish to see you elevated in society. We are not interested in seeing many of you do what we do. We're not interested in seeing you. We're not seeing you. We're not interested in seeing you economically comfortable, because
Mhm.
that's how this structure was invented. It was not
Yeah,
designed to be at the upper echelons of any country in the Western world.
yeah,
Okay? And that's the foundational reasoning for that behavior. And we have to be able to say that. And if we're not going to address the causes for the behavior, then the behaviors will continue for another generation.
yeah.
Yeah.
Agree. Hey, Lana, did you want? We talked also about the responsibility of who does the responsibility lie with, and Justin touched on it earlier. But do you want to expand on that a bit more as well?
Yeah, from what I've experienced living here in the Netherlands and also being a parent myself, one of the things that I'm seeing right now is that we need to have due diligence, in how we show up. Because, like what we've been saying, this takes a lot of work. This takes a lot of emotional labor, energy from all of us, and uh, whose responsibility is it? I would say it goes more on how can we shift this social constructs that
Mm,
we've been living in, this systemic what's this concepts. And I would say, yeah, it's for people with whiter complexions to do the work,
yeah,
mainly because they're the ones who have put all these barriers and all these systems in place. So Justin has touched on it with regards to the economic side of things. It is true, that a lot of these things I remember in our history books. The Spaniards colonized the Philippines for 300 years and kept calling us, Indios. And that idea of, oh, you're lower, or you're less than who we are, has pervaded for so long.
yeah,
And it's not for people of color, indigenous black people to start the movement. The
yeah,
movement it's supposed to be started alongside white people, so that these constructs get dismantled, because it's not serving society, it's not serving the world. And the more that we can have white allies in this movement, then the better that we can address how can we redesign a different society.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have
And
a question in the comments from Constantino. Um, I'll read it out loud because I can relate with Shay's and Lana's experiences, even though I'm not brown. What is the difference between discrimination and racism? Should we put it in the same bag or keep it separate? This confuses me very much. Would anyone like to take that?
Well, we can discriminate against people for all kinds of reasons,
reasons.
okay? And this question speaks to the difference between biases, right, versus racism in particular. Racism is a particular kind of bias that has attached to it action. So I'm going to not hire you because you are too dark. Okay. And that on a grand scale stops an entire group of people, anywhere they might reside, from living in healthier neighborhoods, eating healthier food, living on average longer lives. It's
Yeah.
completely debilitating. So there's actions and policies and laws that are connected to this notion of I am less than because I am darker. Okay.
Yeah.
So we can discriminate because of, like, against people for being too slim, for being to being more morbidly obese, to being too tall, too short.
Too
There are
old.
any number of, right, too old, right? So these are biases that we use to discriminate against people, right? But once you start getting into behaviors that stop now people from living a viable economic existence, when you start messing with people's money and ability to live, okay, now we're getting into structural forms of racism, sexism, classism, ageism,
Yeah.
and that would be the essential difference. So it's thought as opposed to thought that leads to action. Is the general difference between discrimination versus racism or sexism or classism or homophobia.
Yeah.
And if I may add something to that as well, I think we've touched upon it as well in other comments, but for me also hierarchy comes in to place when you talk about the difference between discrimination and racism. With racism, there's a hierarchy. White is like the white male is number one. Then you have the white female. Then you have the darker skinned male and the darker skinned female. It's a really clear hierarchy. And also, what Lana said before, when we want to change the system, we need the people on top of the hierarchy to walk beside us,
Yeah.
because you cannot expect people from the bottom of the pyramid or the hierarchy to make the changes. You need the people who've placed themselves in positions of power, who've made the norm to change. And what I've noticed the last couple of weeks also is, for me, it's becoming more clear, is that they are setting the timetable for change. We can
Yes.
talk about it, we can march, we can do whatever the hell we want, but unless they are willing, it's very clear that they are setting the timetable. Also, our Prime Minister Rutte said it when making a comment about the demos,
Yeah.
is that, yeah, I'm calling it systemic racism, not institutional, because I don't want to scare people. And it's like, no, no, no.
It's still
No.
whitewashing, right?
Yeah.
You
No,
know,
it's not only
if we think
whitewashing, but it's like, if we need to be mindful about the fragility of the
yeah.
majority, then they are setting the timetable, and we can do whatever we want, but nothing is going to change unless they say, okay, now I'm ready to change.
Hmm.
So that's also for me a big difference.
I have another comment in the chat from Paula. Oh, I guess this was referring to my previous comment. Paula says, but you're saying that you pick your battles because your reputation is at stake, etc. What about the abusers? They should be thinking about that precisely. Should we not empower the victims so they can safely denounce the racist act instead of providing shelter to those who inflict it? I agree, Paula. That's exactly what we should do.
But that's also about the privilege. If you have the privilege that you don't have to think about this, and you have the privilege that you can behave whatever the hell you want to, and no one is speaking up to you, that's a privilege. And you don't feel you don't feel unsafe.
Mm,
And as long as you don't understand that the person in power doesn't feel unsafe, how can he help the person who feels unsafe? You cannot
Exactly.
make you first. You have to help yourself feel safe.
yeah.
And if that means not speaking up to everybody, that's okay.
And at the same
Well,
time, there's also that, we can't just keep power and privilege aside in these conversations. Power and privilege go hand in hand with conversations related to racism. And um, it's so easy to say, oh, you need to be empowered so that the abusers won't abuse you. Um, Yet, since it's systemic, since it's something that you've experienced, repeatedly in your life, different reactions can happen. And like what Bernie said, compassion, it's okay where we are right now. What's important is if we can have those safe containers, communities that can support us
Yeah.
in sharing these experiences, and at the same time providing that support where we can say, okay, now you can relax your system, and now you can breathe. And
Yeah.
if we don't have that, and I can imagine that for a lot of people, they don't have that easily in their lives. I
Yeah.
can imagine when, or not just imagine, for myself, when I came here in the Netherlands, I didn't have anybody. I just have my husband and his parents and his brother who's living here in the Netherlands. So it's so easy to say, oh, when you're faced with certain microaggressions, I still have to point it out to my husband that, hey, did you notice that? That teacher kept on talking to you when I'm the one asking the question.
Yeah.
I've had that.
I know
I've
that
had
one.
that.
Yes, I have. Yes,
I've
I
had
know
that.
that one.
I want to because we're kind of running out of time. I do want to thank you guys for coming on here, for reminding me to take a deep breath. Thank you, Bernice and Lana, for that, and also for the conversation and moving the conversation along. This is a 2-part conversation, so we're going to do this again next week, Wednesday. We would love if you could join us again live, but if you can't, you can watch the recording. It'll be on Facebook and YouTube. I'd like to see if you guys want to share any final remarks. And before I say that, this conversation was all about everything that goes behind how to start, why we want to even start the conversation about racism. Part 2, we're going to talk about the do's and don'ts of starting this conversation. And we really wanted to separate it because we felt the do's and don'ts, we need to tell you why it's a do and why it's a don't. So we want to arm you with as much information as we can. We also want to make it clear that this is not everything. We've had to cipher it down to the bare bones of what we can give you. There are other places to get information, other books, there's webinars, there are workshops, there are other places, but we wanted to help start the conversation. So with that said, maybe if you could share your last words and any last thoughts that you want to share before we go.
Think.
I know Justin already knows what he wants to say. Go
So
ahead.
yeah, so I'll say this. In terms of what Lana talked about, in terms of power and privilege, power and privilege tend to, within economic systems, corrupt absolutely, and that process of corruption transcends complexion. So in Africa, you have the power elite who, whether it's because they are the right tribe, inflict massive damage on other people, even though they share similar complexions. In Asia, it's the same thing. Maybe it's based on blood. In the Arab world, it might be based on your family name, whether you have the right name or the wrong name. But whatever it is, the reason, ultimately, what's the foundation is economics, and we must name that and grapple with that. And as we try to conceive of a world in the future, can it be the case that we will have a world that is based on currency?
Mm.
That's I think ultimate question that we've got to decide. Can we rid ourselves of this sort of exploitation while still having a currency economic systems?
Okay.
I think we should do it in part 3, though.
We need a
Maybe.
part 3.
It's going to be a longer
Yeah,
series.
that's part
Yeah.
three,
That's
three
part
through.
3. Yeah. Okay.
Oh.
Lana?
uh, I would like to highlight on the importance of creating safe spaces, for dialogues, for conversations. Um, from this conversation alone, I'm reminded of, okay, let's breathe, let's relax the system. And it is a privilege to have a space where you can do that, where you can share experiences and know that you will be heard. And I actually love this term, to be witnessed. And we're not witnessing each other enough. So for me, I'm more into how can we create communities where we can witness each other, and by witnessing each other, we would be able to get rid of this constructs of, oh, I'm lighter, I'm whiter, I'm brown, so that we can have that definition that we are all one race.
Yeah.
But first, we need to have those safe containers. We need to have these safe communities so we can learn to relax the system and learn to support each other.
Thank you, Lorna. Yeah. Bernice?
Yeah, agree with all the above. And I would like to highlight that in this conversation, and maybe in inclusion and diversity as well, inclusion and diversity work, I think that's important to stress there is a me part about you as an individual, and there's a collective part, and that's about the community, the organization, the team, whatever. And don't forget that you need to focus on yourself, take care of yourself, but also reflect upon yourself. What am I? What are my vulnerabilities? What am I afraid of? What am I scared of? Where am I hurting? Before you can step into a community also and reflect that perspective and feel safe to put your opinion across. So I like to stress that on both sides we need to do work. And normally we focus on, yes, everybody needs to change and organizations needs to change and society needs to change. But don't also forget that it takes some work from you as a person yourself before you can, as Justin eloquently said during our previous conversations, merge with the collective.
Yeah.
So that's what I also would like to stress.
Do you all remember that movie Avatar with the blue
Yeah.
aliens
The blue
in that
aliens.
movie?
Yeah.
As I was listening to Lana, it popped into my head how they greeted each other. Do you remember how they greeted each other? They
No.
would say, the first thing they would say to each other is, "I see you."
Oh.
But that's exactly what namaste means, right?
Right. Okay. And
Namaste.
and what I yearn for is a world where I and people who look like me and people who are suffering similarly, just so that we can be seen, like truly
Exactly.
seen.
Yeah.
Just please see me, please.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I have so many more questions. I didn't get to every comment in the chats. I wonder if Bernice, Lana, Justin, if you ever get a chance to go on the comments, if you can address questions that I didn't get to address, comments I didn't get to address. We're on two platforms, empowerment.work and Empower Amsterdam. The recording will be on YouTube. I'm going to share everything and also all my tidbits, everything I've heard. I feel really good about this. I'm glad we were able to start having this conversation. I'm so happy for those of you who could join us live and contribute to the conversation. And I hope you'll join us again next week. Wednesday, it will be thank you, Justine. Wednesday, the 1st of July at 7 p.m. Amsterdam time, and that is 1 p.m. New York time. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you guys. Such an honor to talk with you.
Exactly. Looking
Yes.
forward to the next
Likewise.
one.
Yes.